Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show, Election 2020. This is our special program on Proposition 115 to place limitations on abortions. First of all, though, I want to remind everyone to make sure you are registered to vote. You can go online and check that. And if you're not registered, you still can register. In fact, you can even register on Election Day. You can even cast your ballot. You can register and cast your ballot on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd. Just make sure whatever you do, if you mail in your ballot, if you go and vote, if you use a drop-off box, if you go to a polling place, your ballot has to be in by 7 o'clock p.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd. Not postmarked by November 3rd, but actually in the hands of your county clerk. Today's discussion is about Proposition 115, and I'd like to introduce my guests quickly. First of all, Juliana Day, who is the sponsor of Proposition 115 to end late-term abortions. She's the leader of that effort and leader of the Coalition for Women and Children. Juliana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure.
And teaming up with Juliana is Dr. Tom Perrill, who is president of Colorado Democrats for Life. And Tom, thank you for being here. And what kind of physician are you, if I may ask?
I'm an internist and hospitalist, currently retired and spending my time on abortion-related and pro-life-related activities.
All right, thank you. And in opposition to Proposition 115, is Justine Sandoval, who is the statewide engagement manager for Cobalt, which is a pro-choice healthcare advocacy group. And really, Justine, is it a spin-off of NARAL, or how would you describe Cobalt? Because when I think of Cobalt, I think of the periodic table of elements.
Yes, Cobalt, we actually are formerly NARAL Pro-Choice Colorado, but in the last year we've branched off to focus more on Colorado's own individual issues with abortion care access here. Cobalt is just a really cool name, I think. So that is what we've rebranded as, and we are working hard here in Colorado to protect access to reproductive rights and abortion.
It's also a great car color, by the way. Anyway, thanks for being here. And teaming up with Justine is Dr. Rebecca Cohen, who is an obstetrician and a gynecologist, and you also have a master's degree in public health. Thanks so much for joining me.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing up my education, because that does allow me to see this issue both as a public health issue and as a physician who provides abortion care.
I appreciate that. And so, Juliana, tell me what Proposition 115 would do if it passes.
Right. Proposition 115 is intended to put reasonable restrictions in abortion when after 22 weeks, when the baby feels pain, excruciating pain during the abortion procedure. It's not going to penalize or criminalize the mother at all, and is going to has the exception for the life of the mother, and also in case of ectopic pregnancies and miscarriages. So just to give the audience a little bit of a context, when it comes to Colorado, we're talking about that 6 other states in the entire United States allows this type of abortion. And internationally, we're talking about 4 other countries in the world that allows this type of elective abortions. And 3 of those are notorious human rights abusers. So what we're intending to do with Proposition 115 is to offer alternatives to the mothers and their babies. It's something very reasonable. The baby can survive already outside the mother's womb at 22 weeks. In fact, at 21 weeks, it has been already cases that the baby survives. And if we discuss even how cruel and inhumane is the procedure, and just to add the fact that in Colorado, there's no any kind of regulations when it comes to abortion clinics, and it's extremely risky for the life of the mother. So what we're trying to do with Proposition 115 is very simple, to offer alternatives to the mother and their babies, and also to bring Colorado in line to the rest of the country and the world.
So just to be clear, so in Colorado right now, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if a woman wants to have an abortion and makes that decision, she can have it at any time during her pregnancy. Is that correct?
Exactly, up until the moment of birth. The state of Colorado allows the type of restriction. In fact, that is one of the darkest secrets in the state. In my walk in the communities, and I'll do it every single day, the people in Colorado is such a loving and compassionate people, and this is very shocking for everyone. They don't even know that this even exists in this state.
Tom, what would you like to add to that? And why do you think people should vote in favor of Proposition 115?
I think it's important to point out that we don't change law prior to 22 weeks in Proposition 115. So women will continue to have the choice in their pregnancy, including the tragic choices that result from a child conceived in rape and incest, and for those with fetal anomalies. As people may not know, that first trimester screening, prenatal screening, occurs at week 10 typically for most of the chromosomal abnormalities. And in fact, it's been expanded recently, so virtually all of the genetic diseases can be screened with non-invasive means. But the most definitive technologies, including chorionic villus sampling and amniocentesis, usually occur between 10 and 12 weeks and 15 to 20 weeks, respectively. And all of those things are available to women. In fact, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists recommend that that be offered to all women, regardless of their risk factors. And so women who would choose abortion if their child might have a disability or chronic disease have that right before 22 weeks. And in fact, in the tragic situation of rape, studies have looked at women who choose abortion for the reason of rape. And a large study looking at over 18,000 women in Chicago showed that virtually all of them chose abortion by 9 weeks, and none of the women who cited rape as a reason sought abortion after 21 weeks. And I'm sure there might be, you could find a woman who changes her mind after 22 weeks, but this would be an extremely rare thing, and we think that the trauma of a late abortion would re-traumatize that woman who's already experienced the trauma of rape and incest.
So, Justine, tell me why you think Proposition 115 is a bad idea.
Well, I want to be crystal clear. Proposition 115 is a ban on abortion. It doesn't matter if it's 6 weeks, 20 weeks, 22 weeks, a ban is a ban. And this is a one-size-fits-all proposition that doesn't take into consideration the individual health of a person, whether or not there's a catastrophic fetal diagnosis, rape, incest. None of those things are taken into consideration. This is an attempt to ban abortion, brought to you by the same people who year after year bring bills like this to the state legislature that get turned away, and then every so many years repackage, change their verbiage up, and put another abortion ban on the ballot. Coloradans overwhelmingly say no to these types of bans over and over again, yet this group continues to ask the same question over and over. How many times can you ask the same question and not get the answer that Coloradans do not support this type of ban? This is dangerous. It puts us in the doctor's room making decisions on people's health and people's personal pregnancies, and that's not our place. It is not our place. This is something that should be made, a decision that should be made between a woman, her doctor, in consultation with her family, or in consultation with her faith. This is none of our business, and this is a dangerous ban that these people are trying to propose to the state of Colorado once again.
So, Rebecca, I'd like you to respond too, but one of the really fascinating aspects that in your reference, Justine, about how Coloradans have repeatedly, multiple times, have turned down a variety of propositions, seeking to somehow limit abortions, and they've all varied in one way or another. This year, it appears, and again, just on some basic polling data, and I don't know how much attention is being paid to this issue, but this year it seems like that Coloradans are close to approving or could approve this measure. I just would like kind of your take on what's different about this year, and Rebecca, I'll get right to you, but I'm just curious what your take is. What's different about this year that it's such a close decision?
I can speak to that. So what is different this year is that, fortunately, many people will never need an abortion later in pregnancy. They may not know anyone who has needed an abortion later in pregnancy, but people do need them. And far from being loving and compassionate, this law is designed to mislead. This proposition is designed to drive a wedge in between people who care for other people and what that means. Far from being loving and compassionate, this law actually deprives health care to those who need it the most. What we know is that someone who is raped may not recognize until later in pregnancy that they are pregnant. They may not be able to seek care because their abuser may keep them from seeking care outside of their own carefully limited world. Someone who finds out at 20 weeks that their pregnancy has a severe or lethal anomaly may not be able to get the confirmation, may not be able to get the appointment, may not be able to get the information that they need in order to make the best decision about the pregnancy for themselves. And currently, under Colorado law, no one is forced to have an abortion. People can seek alternatives on their own. They can choose to continue a pregnancy, and to deprive them of the health care that they need, that they want, is cruel. It is not kind and compassionate. It is cruel and it is unethical. And that is why I'm opposed to Proposition 115.
Let me ask if this statistic is anywhere near correct, that in their lifetimes, approximately 1 out of 4 American women have an abortion. Is that an accurate statistic? Because I was surprised at what a high percentage that was. Can anybody tell me if I'm wrong or right?
No, that is accurate. So what we know is that 1 in 4 women will have an abortion at some point in their life. What we also know is that most of those abortions do happen in the first trimester and would not be affected by Proposition 115. We also know that most people don't talk about abortions because it is so highly stigmatized, and it is that stigma that is propelling Proposition 115.
So, Juliana, I'd like you to, one of the points you made was that in past, some of the past versions of proposals, there was a penalty for a woman if she had an abortion at a certain, past a certain point in time. In this measure, just to be clear, there's no penalty for a woman having an abortion. That's true, right?
That's right.
And there is a potential financial penalty for the doctor, the medical provider, however, who is involved in the abortion process, and also he or she potentially could lose his or her medical license as well, which is pretty severe. Talk a little bit about your, why you did that or your thinking there.
Right. Before I start just discussing all the details, I really don't appreciate the misstatements or misinformation, because that's not true, what you guys have been stating. And I want to make sure that people who are listening, they understand. First of all, it's not the same groups. I'm the sponsor of the proposition. When someone is talking about that there is going to be just a ban or a ban on abortion, that's not true. I'm the sponsor of the proposition, and the idea is to come out with something that is very reasonable, that the entire world pretty much agree that this is savage, is inhumane, is extremely dramatic for the mother. We are talking about, and this is what it is, the dismemberment of a child, of a baby of this size. This is what it limb by limb. And what is important for the people to understand, that this is a procedure that costs approximately between $10,000 to $40,000. The opposition doesn't want to recognize or even agree with something just so reasonable like Proposition 115, because there's a lot of money that is at stake. So when it comes to what you were mentioning, yes, it's true. I work with a community every single day. And behind me, they are not like politicians. You can actually, the audience can search, and the no on Pro 115, there's a long list of politicians behind that. Behind me is just a team of medical doctors that are very knowledgeable and the loving and compassionate community of Colorado. So any kind of lies or misinformation, please, I don't appreciate that because I'm the sponsor of that initiative. And for me, working with the communities, I directly talk to women affected by abortion, late-term abortion, and I cry with those women. Just the dramatic pain and the psychological pain, the emotional pain, and many times the physical pain that those women go through. That is not right. When Dr. Hearn, the abortionist in Boulder, is telling a woman that after Dr. Hearn injects the poison into the baby's body or through the amniotic fluid, that the mother should expect the kicks of the baby for hours, up to 24 hours, because the baby is anguishing in pain. When at 22 weeks, one of the most common procedures is dilation and evacuation, that is the dismembering limb by limb of a human being while the baby feels excruciating pain. That's the reality. When they are telling the woman, yeah, it's the decision between the woman and a doctor, but the reality is the organizations like Cobalt, Planned Parenthood, and others, they don't sit with a woman and explain step by step how this is going to affect their lives. Those women are scarred for life. That's the main reason why organizations like the opposition, they don't want to even show the ultrasound to a woman because they are scared that the woman will say, no, I don't want to go through this.
Okay, so I'd like Justine and Rebecca to have a chance to respond to that. And Justine, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, a few things there. With all due respect, Ms. Day, you are not the first person to do this. I've been working on this issue for 6 years, and it's the same groups of people over and over and over. You are just the newest spokesperson for this issue. This is not something new. This is something we've seen over and over again. And something that I really take issue with that our opposition continues to say is that there's this like abortion profit machine and this abortion mill. That is insulting. That is not the case. Abortion is a medical service, and it's kind of gross to me that you would paint that type of service as some type of assembly line. Women are people, and they access individual health care that is right for them. So it's actually even worse that we removed women's health care so far from health care that it has to be in separate buildings with barbed wire for people just to access basic medical services.
Justine, I assume abortions are covered by health insurance.
Yes, some private health insurance will cover abortion. In the United States, there's something called the Federal Hyde Amendment that blocks federal funding for abortion. And in Colorado, we have a state Hyde Amendment that blocks any state funding from funding abortions.
So if I apologize. So if I'm a person at the lower financial or economic level, are my choices limited compared to a woman who is in a six-figure household?
Absolutely. These types of bans and these type of restrictions on reproductive health care affect the most marginalized communities. Women of color, poor women, LGBTQ plus communities, immigrant communities, young people. These type of bans create restrictions. We like to believe that we live in an equal society, but we don't. Not every person has equal access to the health care that they need. And restrictions that have been put in place make it harder and harder for people to access that. So you are paying out of pocket. You are, sometimes if you don't have the means to access abortion when you need to, it takes you longer to collect the resources you need. Sometimes you need childcare, you need to travel far to one of these clinics. So there are lots of restrictions that are already in place, and it really affects people who don't have the financial means to access this service.
So before I jump to Rebecca, I mean, 43 states in the United States have some kind of limitations on abortion. And when you look at the pro-choice camps and the pro-life camps, is something like a 22-week or 26-week or whatever the case may be, limitation, wouldn't that be seen as a reasonable compromise by a lot of people?
I mean, One thing that I like to point out is that the reason why they chose 22 weeks for the ban is because it polled well nationally. It's not rooted in any medical science. It's not rooted in any type of fact viability. It just polled well at 22 weeks. To us, that's dangerous because every single pregnancy is unique. You cannot predict the outcome for a pregnancy. That's why any limit on abortion is dangerous, because sometimes you may have a pregnancy where you were never expecting to have an abortion, but it comes up within your pregnancy. And because every single circumstance is unique, any type of restriction is dangerous, and it limits people's full range of access to the healthcare that they need.
All right, well, I've only said I'm going to come to you 12 times, Rebecca, so I'd like your comments, and then I'd like to go to Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think all of us in this space are feeling deeply offended by the lies, that we perceive coming from the other side. I want to say science does not support fetal pain at 22 weeks. That is misleading, that is incorrect. I also want to say that the implication that as an abortion provider, I provide substandard care, I'm motivated by finances, all of those things are false. I provide abortion care because women and families in Colorado need abortion care. There are many reasons why someone may seek an abortion later in pregnancy: rape and incest, catastrophic fetal anomalies, late recognition, significant maternal health issues, not only threat to life, but threat to health. All of those things are needed. That is why I provide.
So from a medical perspective, in terms of the 22 weeks, what would, if a woman's pregnant, what might happen post 22 weeks that she wouldn't know about? Obviously, if a woman had been raped, I mean, she obviously knows about that immediately, so that's not a post 22 week issue. Can you give me one or two examples that are specifically situations where a woman might find herself in where conditions have changed after 22 weeks so much that she wants to make this choice?
Absolutely, and so I do just want to address, someone who is raped may know immediately, they may not want to recognize it immediately. I do have patients show up to my office at or after 22 weeks because they've so deeply buried the trauma that they don't want to acknowledge or don't want to recognize the possibility that they may be pregnant. Other things that can come up.
By the way, that is a great point. That is a really extraordinary point, and I apologize for not even thinking of that, but please go ahead.
Absolutely, and so maternal health conditions can worsen significantly. We can have people with pre-existing heart conditions, pre-existing lung conditions, or even new things that come up like a maternal cancer diagnosis that may occur after 22 weeks. We can have that devastating fetal diagnosis that you may have some first idea around 20 weeks, but then you need to get confirmation, do additional testing, see additional specialists, so that need may be there after 22 weeks.
All right, Tom, please.
I'd like to address some of those issues. First of all, regarding the financial issue, my first impression about people who perform abortions was in medical school at Northwestern, where one of the attending physicians on the OBGYN service drove a Rolls Royce. And I couldn't imagine why that would be, and the resident told me because she had a lucrative abortion practice. That was the first time I realized the connection between how lucrative the abortion industry is and what drives some of the practices in the United States. As far as the other issue, there is never, I've talked to Dr. Hearn, I've talked to international experts, there is never a reason that you have to do an abortion after fetal viability, which is 22 weeks, to preserve the health or life of the mother. I've asked Dr. Hearn that, I've asked the faculty at the University of Colorado, I've asked faculty across the country at academic centers, and no one could give me a single instance when abortion rather than delivery is necessary. If you have a pregnancy-related health emergency or urgency after 22 weeks, you deliver the baby. There's no advantage to killing the baby. And this whole notion, it's an absolute misinformation and a false narrative. And with regards to the rape issue, I already told you, when people objectively look at the issue, 19,000 women who had abortions, not one who had rape as the reason, sought abortion after 21 weeks. So, let's deal with the facts rather than these straw man false narratives that people are trying to dissuade people from voting for Prop 115. It just isn't accurate, and it really needs, the people of Colorado need to know this.
So Tom, was the 22-week period selected? I mean, you made a reference that at 22 weeks a fetus is viable. Is that why the 22-week number was selected?
Yeah, 22 weeks was selected because it's now the standard of care in the United States as well as Europe that 22-week babies offer medical care when they're born prematurely. And also the issue of pain. I think Dr. Cohen is referring to a study from 2005 published in JAMA, written by people who were opposing abortion restrictions that said you have to wait until later in the third trimester to experience pain. That has been debunked by many national, international experts, and I have a volume of information on that. The most recent review in one of the most authoritative perinatology journals suggested that for sure fetuses can feel pain between 22 and 24 weeks gestation. And there was a recent publication that suggested we should really acknowledge that babies as early as 12 to 13 weeks probably experience significant pain, and we should address that issue in our abortion practices.
So Juliana, I'd be interested if, I mean, one of the issues I remember having many years ago was a discussion about viability, that if there are limitations, should viability be the, the guiding line. In reality, as science advances, as medicine advances, viability approaches closer and closer conception. Is that a fair statement? So if we pick 22 weeks today, if viability is our guiding line, won't viability move to 20 weeks, to 15 weeks, to 10 weeks, or whatever?
Well, the reality is, as a proponent of 115, this is not a backdoor channel or the desire to start banning abortions altogether. It's very clear, and the people should read it. Read the Proposition 115, and it's 22 weeks. My desire is nothing else, 22 weeks to have something very reasonable when a baby already can survive, when or the baby can feel excruciating pain. And one thing that I want also to point out, that if we're talking about finances, because behind this, whether you guys don't want to admit it or not, the opposition has already $7.5 million to fight it. And there's even money coming from out of state. We just have the loving and compassionate people of Colorado. This is just grassroots. And you can check all the reports because it's open. So you can check what we are reporting and what they are already receiving and how much money they are coming from organizations, from lobbyists, from corporations. When it comes to me, $5, $10, $50, that's what I receive. It's everything reported. So when people are trying to say that it's a backdoor channel, that's not true. So it's time just to speak the truth. It's time to focus on what is science. Because one of the questions that you asked was about the procedure. You guys don't want to address the procedure because science is science, and one of the most, the procedure that is what is used after 22 weeks in Colorado is dilation evacuation. It's the dismembering of a child that is alive, is fully formed, limb by limb, and that's what you guys don't want to tell. You need to address. In fact, when I went to the state capitol and testify, one of the questions from one of the senators was like that: please explain the procedure. And none of the abortionists there wanted to explain it. So when you're talking about discussing that, the mother with the physician, that's, you know, that the mother doesn't receive all the information. So what we're trying to do very clearly here is just something very reasonable. And no matter what happens later on, I'm the proponent, and it's 22 weeks when a baby is already viable, when the baby can survive. If a baby can survive outside the mother's womb, there's no reason, physical reason or health reason of the mother, to perform a late-term abortion, considering, and this is something to keep in mind, that late-term abortion takes between 2 to 4 days for the mother to have an abortion, late-term abortion. A C-section in a true emergency, it takes only 30 minutes to perform. So in a true emergency, the doctors will perform a C-section.
Okay, Rebecca, please, yes.
So I am a practicing obstetrician. I understand everything that Ms. Day is saying. And again, I am deeply offended at the implication that I do not provide my patients with the information that they need to make the right decisions for themselves and their families. What we know is that dilation and evacuation is incredibly safe, that abortion later in pregnancy is often the safest thing to do. It is an abortion later in pregnancy. It is not a late-term abortion. That is not medical. That is not scientific. And that a C-section carries health risks for a patient for that pregnancy and for future pregnancies. What Proposition 115 does is it takes healthcare out of the realm of physicians, which I am, and out of the realm of patients who are living the lives that they need to live. This is deeply offensive, it is unethical, it is not scientific.
So what is tell me quickly, I know we're almost out of time, and I want to give each of you a chance to kind of sum up why voters should either support Proposition 115, or oppose it. But how, compared to other procedures, where do abortions rank in terms of safety? Is this a procedure that is very dangerous? Does it get, I assume as a layperson, the later you do an abortion, the higher the risk to the patient, to the woman in particular? But Rebecca, please comment on that, and then Tom, I'd like your thought.
So what we know is that although they are absolutely different in very many ways, having an abortion, even an abortion later in pregnancy, is safer than carrying a pregnancy to term and giving birth. There is always risk of any medical procedure, of anything like a colonoscopy, of a dental cleaning, of anything. And the care that I provide for my patients involves discussing those risks. It also involves the risks of staying pregnant when someone's health or life is in danger, and balancing that against the odds of continuing a pregnancy or the risks of continuing a pregnancy when the pregnancy is affected by a severe anomaly. What we know is that this is very unique, that every pregnancy is individual, and that as a health care provider and an abortion care provider, I do discuss those risks with my patients, and I make sure that they have the information that they need to make the best decision for them.
And some proceed with an abortion, I assume, and some do not.
That is correct. As I had mentioned before, under Colorado law, no one is forced to have an abortion. People often do choose to continue a pregnancy, even if their health is at risk or their fetus has a severe anomaly. That is always their choice, and I support them in that choice if it is the best choice for them.
Tom, I'm going to give you the last word on this before we go to a summary, but I had a quick medical question, which is, if someone post 22 weeks, if something happens to a woman where she has some kind of medical condition where she concludes she concludes she shouldn't or doesn't want to have the baby carry the pregnancy to term, under 115, would she be prevented from making that decision?
A woman who has, for whatever reason, decides after 22 weeks that she cannot care for the child, adoption would be the option that Proposition 115 would suggest. And women make that choice all the time. And as I said before, there is no evidence that abortion is ever necessary after 22 weeks to preserve the health and life of the mother. As far as the risk goes, the CDC looked at 42 million pregnancies and published their data and showed that first trimester abortions are safe compared to every outpatient procedure. It doesn't mean there's not complications, but they're safe. But for every additional week of gestation, the risk of dying from abortion goes up 38%. And by 21 weeks, the risk of abortion is equivalent to the risk of childbirth. And based on the exponential nature of the curve, there's every reason to believe that a 22-week abortion is riskier than childbirth. Those are the facts. The CDC has published those facts. And not only is the risk for dying gone up, but there's recent publication that shows the risk of hemorrhage goes up 7% for every additional week of gestation. The complication rate is substantial. And in Colorado, there's no safety or licensing regulations for abortion clinics. So you have this procedure that is riskier than childbirth, riskier than other outpatient surgical procedures that are regulated and licensed, and it's occurring in an environment like this, and it's just not safe for women of Colorado.
So 2 quick questions on that. So you're saying, number one, that people who perform abortions in the state of Colorado don't have to be licensed medical professionals?
The abortion clinic is not licensed in the state of Colorado, as opposed to ambulatory surgical centers, which do most outpatient surgical procedures. Those are licensed and regulated by the Colorado Department of...
No, I meant the medical professionals.
The medical professionals who practice medicine have to be licensed, and that's the only licensing requirements.
Yeah, that was confusing. Let me ask you one other follow-up question. You mentioned after, I forgot what week you said, a 38% increase in probability per week. Give me that statistic again.
For every additional week of gestation, the CDC established that a risk of dying from abortion goes up 38%.
Per week?
Per week.
And what does it start at?
That's why, even though first trimester abortions are safe, you can imagine if you go up 38% per week, that by the time you reach 20 weeks, and Planned Parenthood, by the way, has said that at 20 weeks, the risk of an abortion procedure is equivalent to childbirth. I've got their quotes based on their research.
So what, okay, one last point, and then I want to go to Juliana. What is your baseline? 38% increase in what is your percent risk? Is it like 1% or?
The baseline is extremely small. It's close to 1 per 100,000 women, less than 1 per 100,000 women early in pregnancy.
So you're talking about a hundredth of 1% or something on that order.
It goes up to about 9 per 100,000 women at 20 to 21 weeks, which is more dangerous than virtually every other outpatient surgical procedure. And the risk of childbirth is 8.8 per 100,000 based on CDC data.
Okay, so I mean, it's just important. I mean, the 38% per week is a huge number, but if you're starting at a base that's a tiny fraction, it actually isn't as significant as that sounds, though, certainly it's I mean, if you're one of those people, it's significant. Juliana, I know we're out of time. I want to give you, and if Tom has anything to add, tell our viewers why they should vote for, why they should support Proposition 115.
Sure. Proposition 115 is something so reasonable. There's nothing obscure. There's not a backdoor channel like the opposition is trying to make it. I'm the sponsor of Proposition 115, and it's something very reasonable. It doesn't penalize or criminalize the woman. To the contrary, we're trying to offer alternatives. When we're talking about that Colorado is in relation to the entire country and in relation to the world, it's just an outlier. And where we're trying to put it is Colorado in line with the world and the entire country. So this is so important. Like I said, there's no penalization. There are exceptions for the life of the mother. This is a procedure, late-term abortion, that is extremely risky for the mother. Consider also that there are no regulations for abortion clinics, and the opposition is making millions of dollars out of women in crisis and babies. And once again, just to remind the audience that this is the baby that at 22 weeks is alive, fully formed, and being dismembered limb by limb or injected with a digoxin. This is a procedure, late-term abortion, that is extremely traumatic for the mother. I know, I've heard their testimonies. There's a lot of regret. There's a lot of emotional pain. Abortionists like Dr. Hearn cares less about that. They don't follow up with his patients. So there's a lot of pain from the women. It's time for Colorado, the loving and compassionate people of Colorado, to just see this as a human rights issue.
Okay, and Tom, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I'd just like to remind Coloradoans that we don't change the choices women make before 22 weeks for any reason, including tragic situations of rape, incest, and fetal abnormalities. And as I said, most fetal abnormalities are discovered well before 22 weeks. And the data shows that only a small minority of abortions after 22 weeks are done for any medical indication or fetal anomaly. Most of them are performed on healthy women with normal fetuses. And we think there's better alternatives to offer these families. And Proposition 115 will ensure that not only are babies protected, but that women are protected because of the risk associated with late-term abortions as well. So I'm encouraging the people of Colorado to vote yes on 115.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, tell our viewers why they should vote no on Proposition 115.
Thank you. So despite what we have heard today, Proposition 115 is not kind, it is not compassionate, it is not scientific. What Proposition 115 does is take away a healthcare option from people who need it the most. I encourage voters to really understand the issue, to be compassionate, and to oppose Proposition 115.
All right. And Justine, you get the last word. Why should voters vote no on Proposition 115?
You know, as the statewide engagement manager for COBOL, I've spent the last several years having the pleasure to travel all over the state and talk to women all over about this issue, and it is very important to Coloradans. Coloradans are very pro-choice. We've said so at the ballot box several times, and we know that Proposition 115 will ban abortion in Colorado, and we know that every pregnancy, once again, is unique, and it is not our place as Coloradans to be making decisions for people. These are decisions that need to be left to individuals, and that is a Colorado value, the value of people having civil liberties and being able to make choices that are best for them and for their families. That is why I'm encouraging everybody to vote no on Proposition 115.
All right, I want to thank my panel, Juliana, Tom, Justine, and Rebecca for joining me today. Make sure you research Proposition 115 so you can make an informed decision. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. Hi, I'm Aaron, host of the Aaron Harber Show. Right now, everyone is stressed out, and some people really need extra support. This is the time to reach out to family, friends, and others. And if you or someone you know needs help or is in crisis, please contact any of these agencies. There are many people waiting to assist you and anyone else who needs help in these difficult times. Please don't hesitate to reach out now to help yourself and others.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. Hi, I'm Aaron, host of the Aaron Harber Show here on Channel 3. As part of our Stop Scam series, I want to remind everyone con artists will try to get your money any way they can. If an offer sounds too good to be true, it probably is not true. Here are some security tips. Don't answer calls or texts from anyone you don't know. Government agencies will never call to ask for personal information or money. Do not give out your Social Security or Medicare numbers, credit card or bank account information, or passwords. Government payments never need to be confirmed in advance. A prize you won which requires a payment is a scam. Never send money or gift cards to someone you don't know. Look carefully at email addresses so you aren't tricked into thinking it's legitimate, and don't open emails from anyone you don't know. Delete all emails which ask you to log in to an account, and protect yourself by visiting these websites. Hi, I'm Aaron Harber. The goal of my show is to inform viewers about a diverse range of topics, from our country's leadership to economic and tax policies to energy and environmental issues, with the participation of the most significant stakeholders in each arena. Our long-form approach gives each guest the time to fully speak his or her mind and gives the audience all the facts, allowing everyone to draw their own conclusions.
Thank God you do your homework, and just doing what you do is enough to begin to let them know what's happening.
I strive to bring together guests with perspectives from across the entire political spectrum to promote problem resolution through civil discourse.
Keith Olbermann and Glenn Beck and Rush Babe, frightening people and using emotion, fear, guilt, and racism. What a bunch, from the right and the left.
I've personally experienced our democratic system from the inside, and I use my knowledge and expertise on the show to get clarification of major points and expand the discussion to ensure my audience gets the uncut truth.
What is this bigotry against a third-party candidate? Do the two parties own all the voters and everyone else should shut up and stand in line?
We were on the campus together at Princeton University. Her Majesty does not look any different than she did in those days, and I wish I could say the same about myself. I'm an ardent supporter of transparency in government and strive to play an active role in bringing out all the facts related to our nation's most challenging issues.
One of the things I've learned in life, and you certainly have learned from doing your show, is you got smart people, but they're torn apart, they're polarized. You get into a media environment where it's not things like your show, but the shout shows on talk radio or cable TV, in which there's just this tendency to score political points and be polarized.
Since my days in national talk radio, I've upheld a tradition of being truly nonpartisan, something which seems rare on the airwaves today.
Depending on your point of view, a decision of the Supreme Court might be the wrong one.
I've also found my guests talk to others involved in our nation's leadership, and they have encouraged them to come on the program as well.
We are not final because we're infallible. We are infallible because we're final. Now, no one knows what that means. But
it sounds good.
No, but what it
sounds
means
good.
is we do not have the last word because we are so brilliant. We are, of course, brilliant, but only in the sense that somebody has to have the last word.
It's the focus on issues rather than personal attacks that makes guests comfortable and gives them the chance to tell their entire story. I simply let guests explain their perspective completely, then dig deeper for the audience by drawing from my own knowledge and experience.
Democracy succeeds when you're giving more and more things to people, but the years ahead, we're going to have to ask more of them in taxes and expect less from government.
There doesn't seem to be anyone in either party that has any kind of appetite for asking more of people tax-wise. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're probably right, and that's a flaw in democracy.
Thanks for taking the time to check out the show. I hope this has been helpful in illustrating the nation's need for a balanced, nonpartisan program to shed light on today's issues. For more information, please go to www.harbertv.com or email producer@harbertv.com. And thanks for watching.